Oh hey, welcome to another edition of Hand-Laid Tracks and 3D Printed Things with Socrates. Today we're taking a look at how to add a color change to the CR10 3D printer using Simplify 3D and the G-code. In Simplify 3D they've got tabs. The script tab has a tab for post-processing, and you can add a line to change the filament based on layers. And so what you have to do is you go through the slicer and you find the layer. Like in this case, this is the Titan submarine I recently made, and it prints in two parts, and it's hollow and not hollow, and the main sub prints like this. And after a few layers you want to change the color, because this is all one piece print. You change the color from, in this case, gray to white, and then about 470 print layers later you change the color again, and then once again back to white and back to in this case silver, and then in the end I did a little copper for the nuts, and then clear, and the copper actually leaches into the clear slightly, so it kind of gave it a nice tint, and in the end I was quite happy with that. And you slip the tails back on. Got a nice little model, and to make it a better model you can print it with the colors, which you can do using the G-code. And so using the slicer you can add a couple of colors, and this is basically two different prints. It stands a separate print, but nonetheless with a couple of G-codes you can add color changes and make a no print or no paint model. Pretty complex, pretty simply. And find the proper layer height. You go into the slicer. So I'm using Simplify 3D as my slicer, and for this I used primarily a 0.16 layer height, but I used enabled adaptive layer height, so it's between 0.08 and 0.16. Depends on the surface. Curved surfaces come out much nicer with adaptive layer heights, and this is going to determine what layer you end up at for your color change. And under scripts and post-processing is where I have a whole bunch of code to change the colors for this, because I add a little beep beforehand so I can be alerted that it's about to happen next up. And this is the actual code line that changes the color. I have the layer that you want to change is here, so it's the layer after it's the first layer that the color changes on, basically. So you have to change it in two places, and it has to be the same. The M300 is the beep code. The G91 changes to relative coordinates, because I then have a G1, which is a move command, which moves the nozzle up and away from the print area. The M600 is the change color command. This will change the filament. G1 then is a extruder. It basically moves it back so as to keep the ooze from happening coming onto the extruder. G90 goes back to relative or regular coordinates, and the M17 goes back into what we were doing. And you basically have to add this, and just the most important thing is that the layer in the front and the layer in the back have the same number. And the way you determine that number is you go ahead and you slice it using those properties that you just did. And since this is a big model, it takes a few moments. And then you will find which layer happens to be at the place you want the color to change. In this case we're going to be looking here at the leg, where it goes from gray back to white. So we want to grab the slicer and pull it down to the proper height. And what I'm looking for is where the foot first separates from the leg. See right there. Right here is the point when it changes back into white, and because this is the tip of the foot is right here. So this is a layer that I want it to be at for the first color change, which is 526. So back without the first color change, this color change. So you would go back out of here, back to the setup where the script was, and basically you should write it down on a piece of paper, and I have a piece of paper with all the little numbers and the colors on it, so I can put this next to the printer. This is a throwaway thing. And in here is a line 526. We add 526 to the front, and we change this 526 to 526 as well. And I use just the M300 code on layer 525, one layer before it, so I get a beep so I can wake up and run over to the printer, because this is about 10 hours into the print. This particular print's about 12, 14 hours long. I can't remember exactly. And so once you set that up, the printer will beep. Prior to needing to run over there, you run over to it. When the beep happens, it'll automatically eject the filament. You do a change of color, it reconnects the filament and purges it out. You might have to do a double purge if you're using white or clear after a dark color, because it will leave a taint for a little while. And then back on your merry way, printing away. So here we have coming up to the copper color change. It makes a beep, so I've added some beeps to it. And once the color change kicks in, you can hear the beep, alerts you to what's going on. It automatically kicks out the old filament, so I snip off the one that's getting removed and take that out of the machine while the filament's coming out. Then you remove the old piece of filament, put the new color in, you hit the knob once and it pushes it down, refeeds the whole system, and push the knob again, and away we go. In this case it's doing copper for a mere 3 layers, I think. The nuts are in copper, and then it leaves a little bit of the copper tint in the clear for the window as well, so it's kind of a nice effect. There's a second color change, kicks out the copper, putting in the clear now. And because the clear and whites and such will hold color and will definitely leach color for a while, I did a double purge. So you'll see the wire stops at some point. I push the button on the controller again right there, and now we have a second purge, and then it'll go through and go back to printing. And I wait till the last second to pull off the wire to try to get as much of any ooze away as possible. I added a little retract into the command as well, and that helps to keep the ooze down. And then the end of this takes a while because it's using adaptive layers, which is a really good way of making a curved surface really nice and rounded. But to do this, first you go through the slicer once to find the proper height where the color change has to be done, and then you go back into the code and you add the code for that particular height. And in the end, the sub came out really good. I think it's really pretty sub. If you want to add color changes to the thing, it really helps. You can add things in one print, and a lot of the models I'm making now have multiple colors, and it really adds to the design. So thanks for watching, and if you want to check out that model, it's available on Cults, and lots more. Keep looking, doing more work now. See you on the tracks.